So I basically had 3 family members in hospital and 3 kids at home. I had a company to run, and I quickly realized there's no way I can do this all. I'd say this industry is quite traditional, doesn't always move very fast. But I think in many roles, actually, this industry could benefit from a fresh pair of eyes. So I really believe in the power of vulnerability. And if you can own up to your mistakes and own up to them in public, huge sign of strength. Our climate and our planet, that's devastating. So when I think about my children and grandchildren, I am concerned.
Welcome to Sports and Outdoor Mentors. In this episode, I talk to Greg Nieuwenhuys, the chairman of Mammut and Wattbike. Mammut employs more than 700 people around the world, is sold in more than 30 countries, and in 2022 generated revenue in excess of 300 million euros. We chat about his competitive nature and how that impacts him professionally. We talk about the challenges he faced when leading the Snow and Rock and Cotswold business in the UK, and how prioritising his family has changed his career path, plus much, much more. But before we jump in, I have one favour to ask. Please hit the subscribe button. It helps us to continue to grow the channel, elevate the content, and attract even more great leaders within the sports and outdoor industry to share their insights with you. So enjoy the episode, and thanks very much for your support. Greg, so in doing my research, listening to all your previous interviews, reading a lot of things about you, it's clear that you're super competitive. So first of all, probably in sport, whether it is swimming, field hockey, ski mountaineering, trail running, and then obviously in business, clearly very determined, very ambitious. But also at the same time, you seem to have generally really throughout your career put your family, first, which I think a lot of people say it, but I think it's quite difficult to do sometimes, especially in senior roles. So how have you managed to get that balance right, and why is that so important for you, that balance?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Well, I think that's what you said is not entirely true. As I have not always put my family first. And as you say, I am very competitive. I am very dedicated. I have a lot of grit. I don't give up, and that has a lot of positive, positive benefits. But it probably also caused me to at times get carried away with work. I just never give up, and I hone in. And it took me, I would say, probably a life-changing experience to realize that I could do things differently. So when in 2019, we already had 3 kids, lived in the UK. I was, at the time, CEO of Sports+Outdoor and Snow and Rock. And my wife, by accident, got pregnant. Turned out to be twins, and they were born early. And at 28 weeks, the youngest was 850 grams. And they spent 2.5 months in intensive care. And then after that, went home on oxygen bottles. But then we kept going back and forth to hospital for all the time. So I basically had, and my wife at the same time also got very ill. So both her arms got paralyzed. So I basically had 3 family members in hospital and 3 kids at home. I had a company to run, and I quickly realized there's no way I can do this all. And Cotswold needed a lot of attention, so we agreed that I would leave at the time, and I basically spent a year and a half at home, looking after the kids, looking after my wife. Just trying to take a step forward with the family, and it was kind of, a survival mode. And at the time, I realized, first of all, that, when, the things that are most important in life are you take for granted until you don't have them, and that's the health of your beloved ones. And it's funny, as every day as the boys got a little bit better, you start to worry about new, smaller, less important problems. That's just how the brain, or at least my brain, works. But the second thing is, because I was at home during those 18 months, I saw that there was a world of things going on in my children's lives that I wasn't really aware of. And simple things like, on which day they had PE at school, and, maybe that's easy when you have 1 or 2, but when you have 5, it's a bit more. And I realized that also because of that experience that they've gone through, which was quite traumatic for them, it would be a good thing for me to be much more present at home. And I I was tempted to go back into a role as CEO, but I realized that it would be unlikely for me to be able to find the right balance. Also because of that grit and competitiveness, I just kind of, I don't give up and I continue. And strangely enough, when there's a kind of a collision of priorities, sometimes it's easier to choose for work than for family. So I decided that I wanted to shape my career in a different way, where I'd be much more flexible, and have more time and flexibility to be with my kids. And it's been amazing, to be honest. I'm very, very grateful for kind of that experience in hindsight, because the boys are now healthy and they're thriving. But I'm not 100% sure if I would have done it otherwise, or maybe I would have done it a bit less and a bit later. But I'm 43, and seeing my kids grow up for much quicker is a huge privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, it's I think it takes a lot of guts, I'm sure, as well, to take that decision and to do what you've done. I think many people that get into this type of senior positions that you've been in are clearly so driven by what they do. To take that decision is not easy at all. So congratulations. I think it's something I'm sure you can be proud of, and I'm sure your family anyway are super thankful for.
Thank you. I mean, in a way it's difficult, but in the other hand it's not, because why would also ambitious leaders want to be extremely demanding in their work, but set a lower standard at home? And maybe some people don't do that, but I just realized for me, also having 5 kids, I just needed to have a different setup to be able to give home the right attention.
In the past, you've mentioned that when you were the CEO of O and CC, or is it OC and O? Oh no.
Oh, I've been at both, but
exactly.
The CEO of ONCC.
ONCC,
Outdoor and Cycle Concepts.
Exactly. I should have just said Cotswold and Stone Rock. It would have been easier.
Yeah.
You said that at that time that was one of the toughest challenges you've had kind of professionally. So when you look back on that time, what did you, maybe first, why was it so difficult? And kind of reflecting back on those difficult times, what do you take away from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was challenging for a number of reasons. I mean, it was my second experience as a CEO. The first one was at Bever, where I went into very inexperienced, but that was a really big success, where I had probably a lot of luck and some right decisions. At Cotswold, I think externally the situation was quite difficult. It was I moved to the UK just before the referendum. Mm. At the time, Amazon was becoming very dominant in the high streets. Property costs were extremely high, and then not long after that, JD bought Go Outdoors and became quite aggressive in their price strategy. So from the external environment was tough. Internally, Cotswold had just acquired Stone Rock, and that turned out to be a much more complicated integration than was foreseen. The cycling industry was very hot when we bought the business, so Stone Rock, with cycle surgery, but that had also kind of completely fallen off the cliff. So that became very difficult. And then I think also culturally, to kind of get Cotswold and Stone Rock to work together was also a little bit more complicated than people had initially expected. And then on top of that, I think for me, coming from the Netherlands, I am quite direct and used to working in a quite direct culture where people are open, share their feedback honestly, and that's probably one of the things I found the most difficult, is that I realized that when I came into this role, it took me about a year to find out what the real situation was. So I kept on digging deeper and finding more negative stories, and I was probably initially very disappointed in the people I was working with, saying, why have you not opened up? to me about these problems. Who were you trying to fool? Is it me or yourself? But then I realized I was just mostly also very disappointed myself for not having seen that culture shift and differences earlier, because what people say is not necessarily what they're trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look back at that time, what do you kind of take from that? I mean, you're now chairman of Mammut, but you were also at one point CEO. So were you able to take any of that experience from ONCC and kind of bring those learnings here?
Absolutely. I think that, at Bever, I was 31 when I became CEO of Bever. So I made loads of mistakes, and that helped me learn very quickly. But as I said, that was in the end a very positive journey. The journey in the UK being much tougher, I think maybe I learned even more. And there's definitely a story here again about grit. I think on the culture side, I think that was very enlightening for me, where it really created a strong desire and passion for me to understand international cultures. And that's been very relevant at Mammut, where we're here based in Switzerland, but we have sizable businesses in Japan, in China, in the US, and kind of creating a platform where those teams can work together and be successful is something I really enjoy, about kind of understanding the cultures and the history of those countries, and then therefore how, what is the best modus operandi for those, to have those people work together. But it was also very much around, cost reductions, managing cash, so situations that I'd been, less forced to be involved with before, which I learned a lot from. But probably also to, I think when you get into a job, I'm always thinking about opportunities and what can be done. But I think sometimes you probably can be a bit more honest to yourself about what the real issues of the business are. And as I said, it took me too long to realize what kind of situation the business was in. So I think that, that wouldn't happen to me again in that way.
So during that same time, you were also on the board of the OIA in the UK, so the Outdoor Industry Association in the UK. So what drove you to take on that extra responsibility and support the OIA, and what was your role as a member of the board? Yeah,
that was a pretty easy decision. Very easy, actually. I joined the outdoor industry because I love the outdoors. I'm, as you said in the intro, I love mountains. I love ski mountaineering. I love ultra running. I love running. I love cycling. And I just basically very simply believe anyone who spends more time outside is a happier person and a healthier person, and also a person who takes better care of the environment. So for me, there's a huge part of taking this career is around doing something I'm passionate about, and also doing something that I know is good for people. And that's what the OIA stands for. So I thought that aside from the role at Cotswold, there's a responsibility to society where I can have a positive impact. The other element is just that Andrew Denton is an amazing character, and it was so much fun to work with him and the other board members. So that was a very easy decision. And I think the OIA has put a good standard on a lot of elements that are also can be and have been exported to other countries outside of the UK. So I'm very proud of what the OIA has achieved.
Who are the people that have most influenced you professionally, would you say?
Oh, that's a difficult question. The first person that probably comes to mind is Frederick Hufkens. He is the CEO of Yonderland, or the AS Adventure Group. And he initially hired me as head of strategy and M&A when I came from my consulting career from OC&C. And when I was 31, he promoted me to CEO of Bever. And I remember he called me on a Friday afternoon and said, look, do you want to become the CEO? And I didn't see that coming at all. There's no way I was expecting him to call me. And initially I thought, that's definitely a risk. If I was him, that's definitely a risk I would not be prepared to take. So I thought, maybe I just not do it. And then I thought about it for about 48 hours and then realized, of course I will. This is too good of an opportunity, too good of a company. And there's a lot of reasons why he is doing this. So I am very grateful for that, for that opportunity. Yeah, he's probably, funnily enough, probably the most influential. Then there's been a lot of people who I've worked with in my teams. One of them is perhaps Peter Salmon, who was the CEO of Bever. After me, I hired him initially as director of e-commerce, and then he became omnichannel director, and then he became marketing omnichannel director. And when I left Bever, he became the CEO of Bever, and now he's also moved on. And we also worked at OC&T together, so we've done a lot of work together. So he would also be one of them. But I think probably in each of the roles I've done, I've always been very inspired by some of the people I've worked with. And I have to say, in the case of Mammut, there is something very special about this company, and everyone in the outdoor industry is very passionate about what they do, and often the place they work for. But I've found at Mammut there is a special edge to that, and maybe it's the heritage, it's the Swiss pride, it's the proximity to the mountains. But I have a lot of respect for the people I've worked with, and I have to say also in this case, the shareholders of Mammut who I've worked with have been awesome partners to work with. So I'm also very, very, very grateful for their support.
Great. Yeah, as you said, the heritage, I'm sure I don't even know a fraction, but I mean, for a brand that's 161 years old, yeah, and just looking around this beautiful showroom that we're in today, it's clear that, even though the product, of course, moves on every year, every season, but, you can still somehow feel that heritage, I think, within the business. So yes, it's great to see. That's great to see. One of the questions I get asked a lot is actually by people from outside of the sports and outdoor industry that are desperate to get into the sports and outdoor industry, and they often struggle to do that. What's your perspective on bringing people in from outside the industry? Is that something that you avoid, or that you're open to? Where some people are that it needs to be somebody from within, and others are more open. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I definitely don't have a black and white view on that. I think it's very situational. I think in some roles, it's, for me, quite obvious that it needs to be someone from the industry. And that could be, for example, we've just hired somebody at Mammut for a head of commercial, head of Central Europe. So we'll be dealing, responsible for all the turnover in Central Europe. And therefore, relationships with the B2B accounts are critical. Yeah. And therefore, you're very likely to come up with someone who has experience in the industry. But I think for many roles, it can be very beneficial to bring someone in from the outside. I came in from the outside, one day. And I have to admit, it wasn't very easy. But I think it was my perseverance and grit that I was just like, I don't care how many people I have to meet. I'm just going to keep having coffee with people, and it'll happen suddenly. And it did. And then it went very quickly. But I think in many roles, actually, this industry could benefit from a fresh pair of eyes. And I'd say this industry is quite traditional, doesn't always move very fast. So I think sometimes bringing in that talent from the outside can be very beneficial. And you can see it in the top team of Mammut. We have some people like Paul Cosgrove, who's been in the industry all his career. He's in product. But then we have quite a few others who have not. And I think if you can kind of get that mix right, that's when I think the magic can happen.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think as an industry, we need to continually innovate. And I think if it's the same people that are just moving around between the brands and the retailers, it's tough to do that. So I think injecting that with new talent from outside the industry is really important for sure.
Yes.
But I think I also fully agree that it's tough to do. And so I think your point about that determination and grit and ultimately not giving up is crucial. And I think that's something that people need to understand that it is a more conservative industry somehow almost by nature. So yeah, that determination is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it's tough to get those opportunities.
Well, like you, I've had a lot of people who approach me and say, "Look, it's so cool that you've been able to make your career, out of your passion, and I would like to do that. How can I do that?" And I always say, well, that's exactly the most important part, is that passion. If you have that passion, and people can see that passion, things will come to you if you're willing and daring to pursue it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a slightly different tack here. How's your relationship with technology?
It's I'd say it's mixed. Sometimes I feel like I'm a bit of a dummy with certain things on my kids, learning stuff from widgets from my kids. But I think overall I'm very pro technology, and I've always been. So when I was at Bever, I was a huge evangelist at the time of omnichannel retailing. And in 2011, we didn't have a transactional website, and 2 years later we won a number of awards for best omnichannel retailer of the year. So that was very gratifying. And then I spent some time in the on the east coast of the US at Singularity University to learn about lots of exponential technologies, and recently I've been doing a lot of work with AI. So I'm very passionate about technology and the impact that it has, and AI today I think is at the same time very scary and very inspiring. And part of me believes that sometimes the world would be better off without the technologies, but unfortunately that's never going to happen. So I think the main question is how to make the most of it for your business and your life with a positive impact. So I'm a big fan of technology.
And so how do you do that? What's your approach to using technology to positively impact your life?
Well, if we bring it to business, I think the key thing is that AI, as an example, the technology behind it is amazing, but that doesn't really matter so much anymore. It's really around the interface of how are business leaders going to use AI to benefit their business, and usually that's by looking at consumer issues, consumer problems. People say the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business solutions. So if there is a problem around a product or a material that's not good enough, or whatever it can be, in a lot of cases today technology can be your best friend and helping to solve that problem. But the scary thing about AI is that also it's so accessible and so easy to use that there'll be many people using it which don't necessarily have I would say positive enhancements in mind. And we'll also have to learn to deal with that.
You mentioned earlier on Frederick, who'd been a strong influence through you in your career. In addition to Frederick, have you ever worked with a mentor or a coach?
Yes, I have. Yes. Yeah, I'm for me, I think I've had a few mentors, some of them kind of long-standing relationships over different roles. And these have usually been kind of very experienced business leaders who I initially reached out to and kind of maybe saw in me potential and were like, okay, I'm quite happy to continue to spend some time with this person. But especially in the role as a CEO, I've found it extremely beneficial to have a sparring partner. And sometimes the business coaches have been more around people and how do you kind of manage your emotions and kind of more the emotional side. And some of the coaches have been much more on the business side, and some of them have been kind of, in between. But I am a big fan of mentors and coaches, yes. And it's part of the growing. For me, that really helps me accelerate my growth.
Okay, interesting. And is that something so the mentors, obviously it sounds like it is, it's something that you've proactively sought out yourself? It's not something that has come about by working at OC&C or here? It's something that you've kind of personally always sought out yourself?
Yes, absolutely. 100% from myself.
Okay.
That's where I think it needs to come from. You might be lucky in your career and work in a place where they suddenly offer the opportunity, but even then, it's only going to happen if the drive comes from within yourself.
And is it that sparring partner the main benefit, or is there anything else that you get out of those relationships?
Well, I think sometimes it's a sparring partner. Sometimes it's just seeing different views, where maybe you're being challenged by people, or challenged, and that sometimes people in your team won't be doing that. To be honest, that's still my preferred scenario, is if there is enough trust and confidence in the team, then people will challenge you also in public. But that's, again, my Dutch style. In many cultures that you can't expect that from people. And I still find that difficult sometimes to accept that. But it can also be around leveraging someone's experience and network. There's so much experience, and sometimes certain situations explained to other people, you can get a different view by leveraging that experience or network.
What do you, I mean, maybe you just touched on it, but what do you struggle with professionally?
Well, I think it's I think initially when I left OC&C as a consultant and then became CEO at Bever, I really struggled to accept that people did not have the same ethos as I did. Weren't prepared to work 12 or 15 hours a day, weren't self-motivated. And my initial response to that was to just do the work myself. And that was, of course, a tough lesson, which didn't go very far. So that's something that I struggled with very early in my career. I hope that I've become a little bit better at it. I think the other piece I struggle is when people have an opinion of you, or might disagree with a decision, but not be open about it, but then complain about it later. I just find that very, very frustrating, because I feel that it really hampers progress. So that's probably a bit of a blind spot for me, if that's something I find difficult to accept. And I think the other one is mediocrity. I've probably gotten better at this. My standards were, I think, much higher or much less accepting earlier on. I probably was much more looking at the output of what people were doing and less at the person and the circumstances and the reasons why perhaps their performance wasn't, according to my expectations. So I've softened up a lot in that respect, in a good way. But I do expect people to be honest and do their best.
The second thing you mentioned there around being frustrated by people not necessarily being upfront with you around a disagreement in a point of view or opinion, whatever it might be. How do you address that? Because I'm sure it's something that is ongoing. I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to disagree.
Yeah.
Which I think is good. But how do you try and deal with that? How do you try and manage that situation? Because I think probably there's quite a few people there that struggle with that same thing.
Yes. I mean, again, here it probably varies a lot across cultures. So if I'm going to talk about that in Japan or in the Netherlands, it's going to be a very different conversation. But usually it's about being honest and about setting expectations. And when I'm in a role, it's usually, for example, at Mammut, one of the things I did in the first weeks is to explain who I am, my style, my preferences, and also some things that are maybe not so easy about me. And just to be very clear that I expect people to step up and I encourage debate within the management team, and I encourage people to disagree with me. Also in public, they don't have to, make a huge sauce around it. Just say what you think. And but then it's also around when it does happen, how do you respond? And you're actually showing people that is okay what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Because that's probably also early in my career, I may have encouraged people, but then my competitive nature was around to go into a debate and maybe try and win the debate, which clearly, if that's what you're doing as a CEO, you're not winning.
So you touched on earlier on the culture, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about building a business or building businesses with a people-centric culture, and it sounds like you've been personally on somewhat of a journey through your career on this topic. So why for you is that people-centric culture, kind of almost what you were just describing? Why do you feel that that's so important?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound very blasé, but I would feel very uncomfortable if I was the CEO. Probably a little bit less so the chairman, because I feel slightly less accountable for it. But that's not entirely true. That people don't wake up in the morning feeling excited about going to work. And if they feel like going to work is a chore or pays the bill, then why bother? Then probably this should not be the right place for you. Then, Mammut in Switzerland, and I think we have a lot of exciting things about the jobs we offer. But I think every leader has to ask himself, how do I create the excitement, the motivation, the passion for these people to treat this business as if it was their own? That's really, I think, if you're not working towards that goal, why bother come to work? As a CEO or as an employee, or, that's a lot about empowering people. It's about challenging them. It's about rewarding them. It's about being open about your mistakes. It's about, allowing people to innovate and make mistakes. So I think those things are very, very, very important. And one of the things I've enjoyed a lot at Mammut is actually to see that doing those things is not always done in the same way through across different cultures.
Picking up on one of those points about being open about mistakes, I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. But what's your approach to encourage that type of behavior, either in your senior leadership team or the C-suite, or even the people more junior members of the team?
So which specific trait are you talking about?
The being open about mistakes.
Yeah,
about mistakes that you're making.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's obviously a topic that many businesses struggle with, and there's probably no perfect way. But again, here I think you can explain to people why it is important to make mistakes, and it is even more important to, when you make a mistake, to own up to a mistake. That's the easy part. The saying, the doing is usually where it doesn't always happen the right way. Is people will look at what you do, not what you say. So when people make mistakes and they own up to it, what is the organization going to do? Are they going to celebrate the mistake, take the learnings and apply them to a new project? Or are they going to try and scapegoat someone, understand what went wrong, who went wrong? So I think that difference is very important. And yeah, I think in the heat of the moment, it sounds very logical, but in the heat of the moment, it's not always that easy. So I think, again, there's a task for a leader there to kind of abstract oneself from the situation, look at it from a bit further, and then seeing that, that mistake is a blessing that the business can learn from and move on from. And I think there, putting up your hand, which happened earlier this year here at Mammut as well. I put up my hand in the board meeting and said, look, that's on me. I should have seen this. We all should have seen this. But that's not what it's about here. How are we going to move forward? So I think sometimes as a leader, you can just put up your hand and take the blame, which naturally takes a bit of the pressure and the fear out of the room. And then people can kind of settle into their, nervous systems and think rather than feel lots of fear.
And I sense that's something that you're, even if it's maybe not natural, because I think probably it's not natural for anyone, but you're comfortable to do, because again, in the research I've done, you're open about when things have been difficult, when things haven't worked out. Why do you think that is? Why have you got to this stage where you're able to just say, okay, yeah, well, as you just described, you put your hand up and say, yeah, I screwed up, or whatever it might be?
I see that as a sign of strength. And if you can own up to your mistakes and own up to them in public, huge sign of strength. And it's something that I'm proud of, that I can do, and that I would applaud for others to do. I mean, the impact that it has, of someone standing up in a room and saying, hey, I made a mistake, it's on me, I'm sorry, and this is what I'm going to do about it. Whether it's the CEO or someone else, it can have just such a profound impact on the collaboration within the team. And to be honest, I'd find it also very difficult to look at myself in the eyes if I didn't. That's just it. For me, it's the only way.
Yeah.
And, trying to hide one's mistakes, I think is, what a waste of life.
Yeah.
So I really believe in the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think that as a leader, you need to show strength and courage, but at the same time also be vulnerable. And, we're all humans. We all have emotions. That's why when I came here, I was also quite open about, when I came here, I joined as chairman and then quickly became the CEO, which was temporary. And I was very open around why that was the case. I said, look, I've committed to my family that I'm not going to go into a CEO role for many years. And I explained the situation of the health in my family. And people thought that was incredibly brave. But I just thought it was the context required for people to understand why I was, making that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's very rare to hear somebody say that. And I couldn't agree more. I think that vulnerability is, in an authentic way, really important. But it's still, I think, pretty rare to hear senior leaders be vulnerable, to be open about it. So I think it's great to hear.
You also asked why, and I just kind of thinking that I think I've also probably found out it's a pretty good counterpart to my very competitive nature. I think if you're always competitive, trying to win, and as you say, sometimes in discussions, also maybe trying to win the discussions, I've learned that sometimes you just kind of counterbalancing that completely, it goes a long way. Maybe I need it more than others as well.
So I don't know if this has been the case in any of your businesses, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the topic, but if you come into a business where you see the culture needs to really transform, how long do you feel it's realistic before you're likely to see any real change in the culture? What sort of length of time do you think it takes?
Interesting question. Again, I think very situational. I think here at Mammut is a good example because we bought the business we took over the business in July 21. I became CEO in April 21 and handed it over to Heiko in September 22, so a year later. In that role as CEO, I didn't know if it would be 6 months or 9 months or 12 months or 18 months. But there's a bit of a dilemma already of kind of which changes am I going to make myself and which changes am I going to leave for the next CEO, for him and the new team to completely own. But there was immediately a sense of, Mammut is a business, we're a charity. We have incredible heritage. We have an incredible brand. But we also need to be realistic about monetizing that. So initially, I came in straight away with a sense of, we need to make our money. We don't have a shareholder who's going to put in money every year. We need to finance our own growth and we need to take control of our own destiny. So that was an important part. I immediately also said, we need to be much more customer-centric. I think there was a lot around, we are Swiss, we are 160 years, we are this, we are that. But that doesn't take away any need to work your ass off every day to make your customers happy. And I think that change at the top can go very quickly. But it takes much longer to get it done across the organization. And it also depends how much other changes, at the time there were a lot of people changes and also as a few strategic decisions that we had taken. But I think as a leader, it's healthy to be quite ambitious at your timeline and to put this at the forefront. Because coming back to, what we discussed around the people agenda, I think if you don't care about that immensely, why bother?
Yeah, absolutely. But it is, I think, to your point about the age of the business, the age of the brand, obviously there's a lot of positives to that, but also potentially if there's a culture change that needs to happen, maybe actually because the brand is so old and has so much heritage, maybe on some level it makes it more difficult to transform. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this may not be accepted or celebrated by a lot of people here, what I'm going to say now, but talking about cultures, the Swiss are not known to be the quickest changers, right? So I think that's definitely an element. And I think also being part of such an amazing brand definitely, and probably rightfully so, creates some arrogance. So the need for change is, for some people, less obvious. On the other hand, you have people who are athletes, who are so passionate, who want to be the best, and see Mammut and its potential and think like, when I came in, they were like, yes, finally, someone who's going to help us take this to the next level. So it went both ways. But I think here, what I'd say is also there's always going to be tough moments when you go through a transformation. And when there is a crisis, celebrate it. That's where you can make the biggest changes in terms of culture. When there is a real, and sometimes you can choose to go smooth with a culture change, but sometimes you can just embrace an opportunity to create a bit of a shocker. Yeah, which just kind of, might be painful for a few months or however long it takes, but can help the company further in such a shorter time frame that in the end, the overall kind of stress from that is much less than if you try to extend it over a longer period of time.
So moving back to the industry overall, so when you think about the outdoor sports industry, what do you think are the biggest challenges it's going to face over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I mean, the single biggest is pretty obvious. It's our climate and our planet. That's devastating, what's happening. And, I think Mammut is doing a pretty good job at owning up to our responsibilities, and probably many of our competing brands as well. But it's still slow. And especially kind of in Asia, around the supply chain, there's a lot more that needs to be done much quicker. So when I think about my children and grandchildren, I am concerned, and I'm committed to, as Mammut, to accelerating our agenda. I think I'm proud of the progress we've made over the last 2 years, but there's so much more to be done. So number one is definitely, the CO2 emissions and the impact on our planet. I think weather is also, obviously related to that. But even this summer again has been crazy in so many ways, and it is impacting the way we plan adventures, perform adventures, go outside. I mean, talk about the glaciers and seeing how they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and think about the future of winter sport and skiing and all that. I think that's a huge challenge. And probably the last one is geopolitical. Between the stresses around China and Taiwan and the US and Russia, I think that's that is a threat. But hopefully, the common needs of the bigger countries will prevail to find a positive way forward.
What's your favorite piece of sport or outdoor gear? And it can't be Mammut.
Okay.
Or Wattbike.
Okay. That's difficult. First thing comes to my ice axe, my Petzl Goalie ice axe, which is a lifesaver. But one of the pieces I use the most often, probably the most often, is it's a very simple piece of kit. It's my naked running band. So it's a waistband.
Okay.
You put it around your waist, and that I always have my phone in there.
Yeah.
And any gels, and it's just it's so much better than any other waistband I've ever run with, and I use it, probably 5-6 times a week. And the other one would be my skis, just because they're just the pride of the skis, and that I've climbed to 8,000 meters, and I've always said, if I do that, it's the climbing the mountain is one thing, but skiing down is a real goal. So the skis have always been a huge part of the pride.
Yeah.
So I think that those go a long way too.
Okay. Do you still have the actual skis?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's a good reminder, a good memory.
Yeah. If you look at them now, you think like that. Those are really horrible skis.
Yeah.
They're still so heavy, and they ski. They're horrible for skiing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that makes me feel very old. It's 20 years ago.
Okay. What about favorite piece of tech, hardware or software?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to have to go for generative AI.
Yeah.
That's obviously very hot at the moment. But like I said earlier, I'm so excited and at the same time scared by the potential of AI. And I've been doing quite a bit of work around it. And we've started to adopt it also here at Mammut. And it's incredible what their technology can be done. And I really believe that change is going to be one of the most, if not the most profound changes humanity has faced ever.
So what one book, podcast, TV show, film, whatever, would you recommend for somebody that wants to work in the sports and outdoor industry? Something that you think would be particularly inspiring or insightful or helpful?
There's a book that I read last year, which I had never heard of, surprisingly. Is the book about Brooks, the sporting goods brand, the US-based running brand, and it's written by the CEO, Jim Collins, I believe. We might need to check that name.
Yeah, I'll check it.
Which is an amazing story around kind of his journey at Brooks, and I really love that book. That was a great book. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll check it and put it in the show notes.
And for a lot of people, it's not on the classics. It's not on the classic list of books that people have heard of. So
No.
But I think it should be added to it.
Yeah, okay. I'll make a note. Most valuable piece of advice you've ever received?
Yeah, that was actually from one of my mentors. And I was facing a tough business challenge. And he told me, when you go into a challenging situation with your boss or your shareholders or whoever, always come in with your resignation in your back pocket. And what he obviously meant by that is that you should always be prepared to step down if you don't find the agreement or you don't find the direction that aligns with your purpose. So yeah, I think that was a very meaningful advice. Obviously sometimes you have to make compromises, but you usually know very clearly when the heart is not in it, and when there's something that has to be done that you feel you can't do, then don't do it.
Yeah. I think it's powerful advice. I think for a lot of people, they might feel it's unrealistic. But I think it depends, I guess, how strong you want to, live life aligned to your purpose and values. I think that's what it must boil down to.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your response, and clearly I am privileged. But at the same time, I think it's an easy excuse. And what I mean by this is when our boys were born, our twins, I didn't work for nearly 2 years. I had quite a few big financial setbacks other than salaries. So there was a period where I was concerned about money and cash flow. So I know what it feels like to have financial concerns. But I also have the confidence, I guess, in myself that, if needed, I will be able to find income or generate it through various different ways. And I think it's that confidence that actually gives me the courage to be able to come into a meeting and say, well, look, if this isn't going this way, then it's not for me.
Yeah. I think it must also go back to that, how we started around that competitive nature, that drive, that discipline, that just to get it done, get things done.
Yeah.
I think it just kind of circles back somehow to that. If this was the last day of your career, what message would you give your team here?
I would give them the message that they are awesome, that I've learned so much from being part of this team at Mammut, that I'm so proud of the brand, and that I know that there are many challenges around us, particularly externally, but that if you have the right team, which I believe we have, and you have the right mindset, any mountain can be climbed. And that also applies to any business mountain, so take hold of the rope, wear the harness, support each other, and enjoy the climb to great heights.
And if you could give future leaders in the sports and outdoor industry 3 pieces of advice, what would they be?
Well, I think I've probably given a few already, maybe implicitly, but one is the one we just discussed, is that, stay true to your passion and to your, I would say, emotional compass. Only do things that you really stand behind and believe in. 2 is put your people first. There's no point in doing business if you're not proud of the people you work with and they can't be proud of you and what the company does. And 3 is don't give up. Mistakes happen. It's how you rebound from them. And I run ultramarathons, and there's a rule in ultramarathons: it is never ever going to be a race where you don't feel horrible and want to give up at some point in time, and that's normal. But it never continues to get worse. At some point, you'll start to feel better again. You might still feel worse again, but so have faith in yourself and don't give up. Grind it out. You can do it.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think your approach, your ability to, hold your hand up when you make a mistake, and your family first approach is very inspiring. So I really appreciate it, and I think the audience will also. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for coming over. It's never a bad thing to come to Switzerland, but I appreciate the effort, and it's really nice having this chat, and I look forward to hearing from the other podcasters around what you're doing. It's an amazing project, so I'm sure there'll be lots of listeners, and a growing number of them when this comes out.
Thank you. Fingers crossed. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. We love to read your feedback, so please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks again for your support. See you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.